My dear ones, I am Veronica Hayes, but my grandchildren and friends here in Charleston just call me Ronnie. I'm 75 now, and most days you'll find me at my small stand on the waterfront, selling the finest homemade pecan pie slices this side of the Cooper River. But before the pie, before the peace, there was Beaufort, South Carolina, and the heavy shadow that fell over my childhood. It's a story I need to tell you, a story about how silence can be more dangerous than a scream. I was born in 1950. My childhood was a sun-drenched memory of the coastal South. We lived in a clapboard house near the docks, where my father, Robert, worked as a fisherman and dockhand. He was a quiet, strong man, smelling always of salt and diesel, a man of few words, but a comforting presence. My mother, Esther, was the laughter in our home, a delicate woman with quick, capable hands. And then there was my big brother Jesse, 2 years my senior, my constant protector. If anyone teased me about my fiery red hair, Jesse would puff out his chest and stand tall. "Mess with my sister, you mess with me," he'd declare, and that was the last word anyone needed. Our days were predictable and safe, defined by Esther's humming and the comforting creak of the train passing nearby. We didn't have much, but we had stability. That stability shattered when I was 10. Esther started to cough. At first, it was subtle, hidden behind a hand or an apron. But soon, the cough deepened, and the handkerchief she hid grew stained. The doctor delivered the grim diagnosis: advanced lung disease. It was 1960, and for a working-class family, it felt like a death sentence. Within 3 agonizing months, my mother was gone, fading quickly like a wick consumed by its own flame. Mourning settled over our house like a thick coastal fog. My father withdrew entirely, his silence becoming a cold weight. He began spending his nights drinking at the local tavern, returning after dark to sit alone, staring at the empty kitchen chair where Esther used to sew. Jesse and I took over the household chores, our small hands attempting to replicate my mother's miracle working in the kitchen. 6 months later, my father brought Marigold home. She was a tall, thin woman with an air of efficiency. "She's going to manage the house," my father announced, avoiding our eyes. Marigold was meticulous, a machine of domestic order, but there was no warmth in her touch, no music in her work. 3 months after that, Robert and Marigold married in a quiet ceremony. Then came the announcement. Robert was transferred to a larger dock operation in Savannah, Georgia. Jesse, already 14, would stay with an uncle to finish his schooling. I, at 11 years old, was told I would go with them. I was being severed from my past and sent toward an unknown future, alone, with 2 people who were becoming increasingly cold strangers. The farewell hug with Jesse was the last piece of safety I felt. Boarding that old sedan, driving away from the only home I'd ever known, I didn't know the dark truth that lay ahead. I only knew that my father was drinking more, Marigold was indifferent, and I was about to enter a new city where I would soon lose the last man I thought I could trust. The move to Savannah in 1961 was like entering a world painted in muted, strange colors. Our new house was near the docks, the air always damp and smelling faintly of brine and industry. The floorboards creaked beneath Marigold's careful, silent steps. I missed Jesse's laughter and the sound of the old train. The silence in the Savannah house was oppressive. My father, Robert, had descended into heavy drinking, a habit that consumed him almost nightly. Just shy of my 12th birthday, the second tragedy struck. My father didn't come home. A colleague arrived that night, hat in hand, bringing the news. A dockside accident, a snapped winch, a heavy load. Robert had been crushed. He was gone instantly. Marigold sat in the kitchen, dry-eyed, staring blankly. I cried for both of us, for my father who was lost, and for my brother whom I couldn't reach. The funeral was small, and within 2 weeks, Marigold introduced a new face, her older brother, Garrett. He was stocky, with a thick neck, small, hard eyes, and a perpetual smell of stale cigarettes. "He's going to stay a while," Marigold said, her voice unnaturally flat. Garrett looked at me, a young, developing girl with a slow, possessive gaze that made my skin crawl. "What a pretty young thing," he drawled, reaching a large, rough hand out to brush my hair. I flinched away, and Marigold watched, expressionless. Garrett was not a temporary guest. He moved into my father's room, and soon I heard whispers in the kitchen about Robert's insurance policy. "It's not enough to last," I overheard Garrett say to Marigold one night. "We need a plan." 2 weeks later, Marigold sat me down. "We're moving again, Veronica. Garrett is opening a trucking business. He'll take care of us. Our destination? Darien, Georgia, a tiny town even further inland, even further from Jesse." The house in Darien was dark, surrounded by the oily expanse of Garrett's truck shed. He became the undisputed master of our small, dusty world. Marigold was now his wife, a rushed, quiet ceremony, and was completely submissive, obeying his every loud command. Then, a few weeks after we arrived, Marigold began to cough, the dry, wrenching cough that painfully mirrored my mother's final illness. With Marigold bedridden, I, at 12 years old, inherited the household duties. I cooked, cleaned, and laundered Garrett's grease-stained clothes. He watched my efforts with an unnerving, slow smile. "You're becoming quite the woman, aren't you, Ronnie?" The true horror began that night. While Marigold slept, Garrett found me in the kitchen. He stood behind me, so close I could smell the stale whiskey and smoke. His large, rough hands rested on my shoulders, squeezing just enough to paralyze me. "Time for your bath," he whispered, his hot breath against my ear. It was then I saw the bathroom door. No lock. As I shrank into the quickly cooling water, the door opened. Garrett stood there, a massive silhouette, his small eyes fixed on me. And then he spoke the sentence that would haunt my existence. "We are family, Ronnie," he said, his voice dropping to a sinister, chilling octave as I tried to cover myself with the thin foam. The steam evaporated instantly, and I knew the water wasn't just cold, it was freezing around a terror I could not escape. He was my new prize, and he had just declared war on my future. The weeks blurred into a routine of terror. The nightly bath became the center of my universe, a ritual of dread that I prolonged as much as possible, filling the metal tub with scalding water, only to watch it grow cold as I waited for the inevitable footsteps. Garrett was always there, standing in the doorway, his eyes burning with ownership, his voice a low stream of explicit threats that promised a life sentence of captivity. I lived in constant, agonizing fear of that single, terrible promise: "I won't stop until you're pregnant." Marigold, increasingly frail, was an island of apathy. She saw the fear in my eyes, heard the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, but she turned away, retreating into a fog of illness and denial. When I finally tried to appeal to her, describing the door, the staring, the chilling words, she dismissed me with a cold wave of her hand. "Don't make things up, girl," she coughed. "He's just watching out for his home." School became my only sanctuary. I sought refuge in books and in the quiet concern of my English teacher, Ms. Eleanor. She saw my fatigue and the shadows under my eyes. "Ronnie, are you sleeping?" she asked gently one afternoon. "You're so thin." I wanted to break, to scream the truth, but the shame and the terror of Garrett's retaliation kept me mute. "Just nightmares, Miss Eleanor," I whispered,
fearing that even a lie would somehow reach his ears. My escape planning became desperate. I began hoarding small coins from grocery runs, stashing them in a hole in my mattress, a pittance against the daunting distance to Jessie. I asked Ms. Eleanor, how much for a bus ticket to Raleigh? The $20 she quoted felt like a king's ransom. I was trapped, surrounded by a desert, far from help, with a tyrant guarding every exit. Then, late one afternoon, as I was tending to Marigold, she began to cough, spitting a thin stream of blood onto her linen. I cleaned it, horrified, and she grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Ronnie," she rasped, her voice thick with fever and a sudden, terrible lucidity. "I need to tell you something." I sat frozen as Marigold confessed. The accident that killed my father, Robert, on the docks in Savannah? It wasn't an accident. My brother, Garrett, he was there that day. He planned it. He wanted me and the insurance money, she confessed, her eyes wide with a lifetime of terror. He was always obsessed with me. Your father was in the way. And now he's dying, and he thinks he can take you as his next possession. Tears finally streamed down her face, the tears of an accomplice facing her mortality. "I helped him take your father. I won't let him take you too. I'm dying, Ronnie, but I won't leave you to him. The man who stalked me in the night was not just a pervert. He was my father's killer. Marigold was a murderer's accomplice, and she was terrified of his final, inevitable move. As she coughed again, she whispered, "Garrett keeps a lockbox in the shed office, behind the old tool cabinet. I know where the key is. If you want to escape, you need his money. You need to act before the morning." The clock had just run out.
The next morning, Garrett left for a long haul, saying he wouldn't return until the following day. This was my window. Marigold, weak from fever, finally slept. With a heart hammering against my ribs, I found the brass key she had described, hidden in the lining of his work jacket. I slipped out to the truck shed, the smell of diesel and engine grease thick in the air. The shed office, a cramped, dusty room, contained the tool cabinet. I pushed it aside, revealing a small, nearly invisible door. The key turned with a satisfying click. Inside the metal box, I found thick bundles of cash, Garrett's ill-gotten fortune. I stuffed the majority of it deep into a small pouch I hid beneath my skirt. I was planning to catch the 8:30 p.m. bus to Raleigh, but fate, as always, had other plans. Garrett's truck roared back into the yard late that afternoon. He stormed in, smelling of road dust and whiskey, his face dark. "My safe, the money is gone," he roared, instantly knowing. I feigned confusion, trying to keep my breathing steady. His eyes landed on me. "You little thief, where is it?" He dragged me screaming into the bathroom. "You'll talk now," he snarled, throwing on the cold water faucet. "Strip down." I recoiled. The terror was overwhelming, but Marigold's temptation had given me a dangerous resolve. "Please, I need a minute. I'm menstruating. I need to clean up first." The idea of menstrual blood repulsed him, a lucky detail I had learned years ago. He hesitated. 5 minutes, he hissed, pointing toward the small annex toilet and leave the door open. In that tiny space, my fingers flew. I pulled the small amber pill bottle Marigold had given me, pills she had kept for when the pain became unbearable. Morphine. 2 pills kill a man, she'd warned me. I crushed 3 into a fine powder, quickly mixing the poison into the half-empty glass of whiskey Garrett had kept on the sink counter. I returned, hands shaking, and pointed to my mattress. "I only stole a few coins," I sobbed, hoping the small hidden stash I had collected would buy me time. He tore into the mattress, finding the coins, and roared with frustration, "Liar!"
He grabbed his heavy leather belt. Just as he raised it, we heard a crash from the bedroom, a cry. Marigold. He cursed and ran to check on her. This was my chance. I ran to the bedroom, the morphine now doing its work. "He took the money," I whispered to Marigold. "He'll kill me." She looked at me, lucid in her fever. "He won't," she promised, a strange, calm authority in her voice. "I just did what I should have done long ago." She pointed to the now empty glass on the sink. We barely made it out of the house. Garrett, his face flushed and his movements staggered, stumbled back in from the bedroom. "You," he stammered, swaying. "You poisoned me." Marigold grabbed my arm. We locked him in the shed office, where he soon collapsed in a drug-induced slumber. She pressed the key in my hand. "The address for your brother. Go to Raleigh. Tell Jesse everything." She handed me a power of attorney for the money I had taken. "I'm going to the hospital," she said, coughing heavily. "I will tell them about the money, the abuse, and the accident. It won't be enough for an arrest, but it will be enough to keep him busy. He won't be coming after you, Ronnie." I boarded the late bus, the envelope containing my brother's address and the truth of my escape pressed against my chest, the money safely hidden. As the bus pulled away, carrying me toward a new dawn, I watched the lights of Darien disappear, knowing that my freedom was purchased with the final desperate sacrifice of the woman who was both my captor and my savior. The ride was long, but for the first time in years, the water running down my body was just sweat, not terror. I was free, but I was far from safe. I had the money and the truth, but I had a long way to go before I could face my brother and tell him the impossible story of how his best friend's wife saved me from a murderer. The bus ride from Darien to Raleigh was the longest night of my life, but it was the first I spent truly breathing in years. I arrived battered, exhausted, but alive, clutching the envelope and the hidden cash. My freedom fund bought with blood and sacrifice. I found the small, modest apartment where my brother, Jesse, was living with our Uncle Walter. Jesse opened the door. He was 17, tall, and already rugged. But when he saw my face, thin, scared, and tear-stained, his protective wall instantly crumbled. He pulled me into a fierce, suffocating hug. When I finally found the words to explain the terror, the abuse, the lockbox, and Marigold's devastating confession of our father's murder, Jesse was furious. He held the money, the power of attorney, and the note from Marigold, her last desperate plea for justice. And the pieces of our shattered family history finally clicked into place. Uncle Walter, a gentle but firm man, immediately called the police. Marigold, true to her word, had already been admitted to a hospital in Darien, where she gave a full, tearful statement about Garrett's abuse and the premeditated murder of Robert Hayes. The money I had taken, the key, Marigold's confession, and my testimony about the abuse and the poisoning attempt were overwhelming. Garrett was arrested at his truck shed. He was not just charged with assault. He was charged with conspiracy and the murder of Robert Hayes. The tyrant was finally neutralized, his power dissolved by the greed he thought would secure it. Marigold died in that hospital 2 weeks later, her last selfless act securing my freedom. Jesse and I stayed with Uncle Walter for the next few years. We went to school, learned what it meant to laugh without fear, and slowly, gently began to heal. I learned to talk about the man who was my terror, the woman who was my accomplice and savior, and the father I lost twice, once to death and once to the truth. The scars, both visible and invisible, never truly vanish, but they become roadmaps showing you how far you have traveled. Today, here in Charleston, as I sell my pecan pies, the sweet, earthy aroma reminds me that life can be comforting and safe. I tell you this story, my dear ones, to honor the sacrifice of my mother, Esther, and the desperate courage of Marigold. My greatest lesson is this: the darkness thrives on silence. If you are a child living in fear or an adult witnessing the quiet dread of a neighbor, remember the Savannah docks, the locked shed, and the morphine that bought one girl her freedom. Your voice is your most powerful weapon. Do not wait for a funeral or a jail sentence to speak the truth. Speak it now.